guys, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys, and today we are talking about A Witch in Time by Constance Sayers. Every time I say or think her name, I hear it to the tune of Constant Craving, if you know that Katie Lang song. And just every single time I'm just like, Constance Sayers. Anyway, let's just jump right into this book. I absolutely loved this book. It's right up my alley. It's everything I love. It has witches. It has magic. It has a tumultuous love affair. It has family drama. It has it all. So I'll give you the basic synopsis at first before we get into too much detail. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible because I fear this is going to be one of those really long book talks. And then I'll give you spoilers before I get into any, just because I never want to ruin a book for anyone who is just looking for a simple review. Let's get into it. Okay, so at its core, this book is the story of a woman who, when she was a 16-year-old girl in the late 1800s, her mother put a curse on her, kind of by accident. This family had a neighbor who was a fairly regarded painter. His name was Auguste Marchand, and he would come to live in this house in the country next door to this family in the summertime. And one summer when he's there, he approaches the family and asks if he can paint their daughter. And at the time, she was like 14 or 15, so they're like, I guess, because they were going to pay them a pretty hefty price for, you know, being able to paint her. So they say yes. Then he comes back another summer, and she's 16 now. She's set to be married in the following year to another family's son. And the mom, she doesn't want her to be sitting for his paintings this year. You know, she's like, you're a little too old. It could seem inappropriate. But he comes back with a counteroffer that he'll paint not only their daughter, but also their younger son, like their toddler son, so that it doesn't look weird or inappropriate. He's just to paint her using two children as a subject. And he offers to pay them double what he paid them the last time because they're like two children. So despite her instinct, she says okay because they really need the money. Anyway, as you might be able to guess, what happens is after a little bit of time, the 16-year-old girl and the fully grown artist man begin having an affair, even though A, she's 16, B, he's married, and his wife is currently with child. So they begin having an affair. The 16-year-old girl falls madly in love with him because he's a artist from Paris. You know, it all sounds very glamorous. And eventually her mother finds out, and she loses it, you know, as she would. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I can't imagine how upsetting that would be. So the thing to know about the mother, Juliet's mother, is that she's a witch. We later learn to find she's more of a minor witch. Like, she doesn't have a lot of really honed powers. She's just more of a amateur, I guess you'd call it. And when she takes her daughter home after she's found her in the arms of this artist, she, in her anger, decides she's going to put a curse on this man. And the curse will be that for eternity, he will be just tormented. In every lifetime he lives, he'll be tormented. And so she's doing this curse in the middle of the night, and she's angry, and she's doing it hastily, and she's not a very talented, I guess you'd say, witch. So all of those things kind of coming together for this curse And it doesn't quite go the way she had planned it to go, in that her daughter becomes entwined in the curse. So it's not just one on the painter. Her daughter's also in the curse. They're kind of bound together, which I'm sure is the absolute opposite of what her mother was intending to do. And so now throughout eternity, every lifetime, the two of them will meet each other and it will end badly. It will just repeat itself over and over and over and over again. Now, the night that Juliet's mom does the curse, Juliet sees something, some sort of presence, some sort of spirit come into the kitchen and enter her mother's body, and that night her mother dies. And when her mother died that night, she was 34 years old. That's gonna be important later. So when the book opens, we meet a woman named Helen, and she is being sent up on a blind date after her divorce has gone awry, or after her marriage has gone awry and she's now divorced. And she's sitting down opposite this man named Luke. And after a few minutes of pleasantries, he's like, "You don't recognize me?" Like, he just starts with this really awkward conversation. And she's like, "No, I'm sorry. Have we met before?" Let me read you the conversation, because this was what hooked me. It's in the first chapter. I read it and it just had me hooked. He took a deep breath and looked at the table as he spoke. "You haven't changed. I mean, you have changed. The hair mostly, it's more of a copper color now." He began studying his fork. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "Excuse me? I thought I'd misunderstood him. We've just met." I laughed and rearranged my own fork and knife. He flipped open his menu. "Do I look familiar to you at all?" I shook my head, suddenly embarrassed. "Have we met before? I have the worst memory." "Nothing." "Really?" He leaned in closer. I assumed so I could inspect his face. His small, deep blue eyes danced above the lit votive on the table. I noticed his face had an unintentional tan, like he worked in a garden. At that moment, in the light, something did seem familiar. "Nope," I said, but that was a lie. I hate this moment. He rubbed his legs, looking nervous. I go about 30 years hating this moment, and then you call me and we do it all over again. I just haven't seen you in a long time. "I'm sorry. I call you?" "Yeah, the first time was in 1895 in France." He paused. "Actually, that was your mother, but we don't need to get technical about it." "My mother." "Then there was Los Angeles in 1935. Last time was New Mexico in 1970. Honestly, I'd wish you'd come back in Venice or somewhere a little more interesting. I mean, this Washington place is a swamp." He scowled. "I know you see a resemblance to Paris here, but..." His voice drifted off. I exhaled loud enough to inadvertently catch the attention of the man at the next table. "Let me get this clear. I called you in 1895. I picked up my napkin. "Mr. Werner, I'm sorry. You must have me confused with someone else." "Helen," he said with an authority that surprised me. "I'm really not good at this, but theatrics are childish. Now sit down." "Sit down?" I leaned in, placing my hands on the table. "You're a lunatic. I don't know you. I'm 33 years old, not 100. I've never met you in France or anywhere else for that matter. And my mother? She works for the National Institutes of Health. She did not call you in 1895, I assure you." "Helen," his voice quieted, "sit down." So it goes from there, and right from that, I was hooked. I was like, okay, what is going on here? So I'm going to say that if you don't want spoilers, now's the time to click away, because I'm going to just kind of tell you what the book is about, how it ends, but it's really entertaining. There are parts that are very dark. It gets very dark in some parts. Some of the things that Helen/Juliet have gone through in their lives they're very intense and very sad in some places, which as you'd know if you finish the first chapter, Helen used to be Juliet. You probably picked up on that. Okay, so yes, I would definitely recommend it if you love magic, magical realism, stories about witches, stories about families, and doomed love affairs. It's all there. and it's so good, and I couldn't stop reading it, and I actually look forward to reading it again in the future. So yeah, but now's the time to click away if you don't want any spoilers. So now that they're gone, basically the book begins to illustrate 4 of the lives that this woman and her counterpart of the painter have lived. Now this Luke at the dinner table, he's not him. He is a lower level demon who has been assigned the task of sort of overseeing this curse. He refers to himself as an administrator. And when he says, you know, your mom called me in 1895, he means quite literally when she was doing the curse, she put an administrator on the task, someone to protect her daughter. And yeah, so basically every life that she lives, she comes into contact with both a version of the artist and then a version of Luke. Well, not a version of Luke, he's always the same. Just his name varies a little bit depending on if he's in France or if he's in America when he meets her. And so there's this doomed love affair in the form of the painter and the woman, in that they always manage to meet up at some point in their lives. So for Juliet, it was literally her and the painter. In her next life, she was Nora in the 1930s, and she was a film star. And the painter took the form of a film director who she goes on to marry and has a very unsuccessful marriage with, and he ends up dying, and then she ends up being killed in a car accident. Then in the 1970s, she's living a life where she's Sandra, and she's a musician. She's a very talented pianist. And the artist in that life, he takes the form of a photographer named Rick, a married photographer named Rick, who she ends up getting involved with. And in every lifetime, in every incarnation, she's in love with him, but he never reciprocates it. At least not on a true level. She might think he's reciprocating it, but he isn't. And there's one point when she's talking to Luke, the administrator, and she's telling him about how in the third life, when she's Sandra and the artist is Rick, she's talking about how, no, it's different this time. He's different. He truly loves me. And the administrator says, I can promise you, if you feel like he loves you, it's not genuine. He's not capable of it. That's how the curse was made. There's also another level to the tragic love stories, in that in every lifetime, Luke, the administrator, falls in love with Helen, Juliet, Nora, Sandra, and that's always complicated, and it's part of his punishment, because since Juliet's mom was 34 when she did the curse, called upon the demon, and died, there's a note in the curse that says, I'm guessing that was put there from the demon side, because of course no demon is going to grant you anything without getting payment for it. And it was put in the curse that the girl, Juliet, Nora, Sandra, Helen, will never live older than her mother was when she made the curse, so 34. On her 34th birthday, if she has made it to that age in whatever lifetime, because she doesn't always make it to that age, but if she does, she will die. Like with Nora, she made it to 34, and on that day she was hit by a car and killed. So that's another part of it, and it's kind of Luke's punishment, because he has to lose her early in every lifetime. So there you go. That's a lot of the story, and it was so fun getting to read through the lifetimes, because what happens is once Luke, the administrator, comes to her, once he's called to her, And he's inadvertently called to her. Once something goes wrong with her relationship with whoever Marchand is in that lifetime, whether it's the director or the photographer, once something goes wrong with their relationship, it's a thought that she has that calls him to her. A thought of distress about the relationship. So, and then in her current life as Helen, like I said, she's recently gotten divorced, and now, so the story cuts back and forth between a previous life, and then we get that story, and then we get chapters from in the present, as her past lives are coming to her in dreams. That's how she's learning about all this. Because Luke is afraid to tell her too much too fast, because the last time he tried that, she got very ill because it was too much information. It was too much, pain and stress on her soul to get all that information at once. So now he lets the dreams come to her slowly, and then he sort of fills in the pieces. So eventually, Helen goes to see like a psychic, and he can pick up on what's going on, and he's the one who first explains to her what kind of curse she is suffering from. And then he tells her that there is a way to break it. And that, so this is the major spoiler here. So he tells her that there's a way to break it, that she has to get blood from the family line of Juliet. So she manages to track down one of the great nieces of Juliet, who's now very old and in a nursing home, and she manages to get a vial of her blood from the nurse at the nursing home, because as time goes on, Juliet finds that she has a bit of mind control powers, and so she uses that to get people to agree with her. So she'll be like, oh, you want to give me that blood now? And they're like, yeah, of course I do. And then they give it to her. And then she also finds out that she needs something that was touched or owned or made by the original artist, and she's able to do that because her current ex-husband actually has an art gallery with a lot of paintings from Marchand. He was obsessed with him when they were married, which is interesting because it was him a few lifetimes ago. So she's able to get a paintbrush from that, and then she learns that the final thing to end the curse is that she must kill the administrator, Luke. And so she's very sad about that because she loves him, throughout all these lifetimes, even though they butt heads quite a bit. She does love him as well. But eventually he knows what's coming, and he knows it's for the best, so he encourages her, make sure you do it right, make sure you do it, and then we'll both be free, because of course he's bound to this curse as well. And then, so she does it, and then he kind of just disappears. All the blood and everything just kind of disappears out of the bed. And then a few months later, she's at the beach. She sells her house in Washington, and she goes to Hawaii. And she's on the beach one day, and she sees a surfer, and he kind of comes over to her, and he's telling her, if you ever want to learn to surf, I teach lessons. And she's like, I don't know, I'll think about it, but I'll get in touch if I do. And he says something like, yeah, make sure you do, or see you around. And then he calls her Red, which was what Luke had called her in this incarnation. And she kind of realizes that he's back. But now they're both free. She's lived past her 34th birthday, and now they can have a relationship together as two humans. So there you go, you guys. This, of course, didn't cover everything. There's still other things to talk about, but I don't want to, we'd be here forever, you guys. So I would definitely recommend this book. It's well written. This is the author's debut novel. She did great. It's fantastic. I loved it. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below if you have read this book, or if not, what you thought of the story. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday with another vlog. Bye guys.